David had at one point suggested, after we had complained about the lack of opportunity for training, that we set up our own conference. And Monta and her staff, Anita, came up with the concept of our February Continuous Improvement Conference.
I think one of the things that we first took to heart that we could get our hands around was Deming's 14 points. And we studied those 14 points, and we would use those 14 points in working with our administrators or working with groups of teachers to say, what does that mean in education? What does that mean in your job? What do we do with this? And as we have been prone to do throughout all of this, we eventually Leander-sized the 14 points and hope that he would appreciate what we did with them to get them into education. But we looked at, for instance, point number 13, which is about educating everyone learning and improving within your district. And when you look at how important that is, we can't do this with a committee. It has to come from everyone. So how do we get that done? And one of the ways that we began to do that was to develop systems and processes by which we could all learn together. In 1994, we decided to take a really big leap of faith. And Langford had encouraged us to look at doing a conference. It's impossible to send everyone in your district to a professional conference. You just can't do it. So we decided we would have our own, and we would have a 2-day conference, and we would have multiple sessions concurrent with keynote speakers and a closing speaker and everything that would emulate a professional conference that we could send people to. One of the big things was choice. No one was directed to go to session A, B, and C. They could look at the program and they could choose what they wanted to go to. The other thing we did that first time that was quite a risk was, in in-services, you always had to sign in to prove that you were there. Everywhere. Every teacher in the world, anybody who goes to anywhere, you have to sign in to show that you were there. And we decided there would be no sign-in. You come, you go to your sessions, you learn from each other, and away you go. And we had trained people very well, so they were very nervous about not having something that could be signed. So we made out a little chart and put it in the front hall and let everybody know that they could go pick one of these up if they wanted to and take it to the sessions that they were attending and ask that the presenter sign that they were there. And that made a lot of people feel a lot better, and some of them used it, some of them didn't. But the thing we got on that first evaluation was, number one, 85% of the people said literally, "Thank you. We know you took a risk, and we appreciate being treated as professionals." And we went from there. The other thing that we kept getting through the years, for a few years, was, all right, we have this 2-day conference. We learn from each other. We have all these great ideas that we've learned, and then we go back into the classroom and hit the floor running. We need a day. We need another day so that we can go back to our campuses, share what we've learned, have some time to get with our teams and say, what are we going to do with this? And actually have time to do some planning. What a novel idea. And so we did go to 3 days, and these are instructional days that the state has allowed us to waive so that we can have staff development. That was a modeling of the feedback system within continuous improvement. We asked you how we could improve, and what you told us was that you needed another day. And now you have it.
And I think one of the things that made the February conference, Continuous Improvement Conference, successful is that a lot of teachers in a conference want things that are specific to their area of expertise. A history teacher wants to go and talk about history. An elementary teacher wants to go and make things that they can use in their classroom. And one of the things that I think made it successful is that Monta and Anita held fast to the fact that what we wanted this to be was a conference centered around how we go about educating students and not necessarily what it is we present to them. And so I think that helped the February conference change our culture to a degree, to help people understand how to go about the act of education instead of what it is you're trying to get across to students.
It was hard at first. We went out and begged people to present sessions at those first couple of conferences. Number one, people didn't want to stand out. There was fear. Number two, some of them thought, well, I'm not doing anything special, so why would anybody want to come and hear what I have to say and what my kids are doing? And as we began to convince people, and principals would work with teachers, and departments and our support staff would work with their people to say, look, this is what you've done. You did a PDSA in order to work on a process, and this is the result, and look how many people that impacts. You need to share the process so that others can look and say, what would that mean in what I do? And it evolved slowly to where you would hear at this year's conference people talking about, oh, and next year what I can do is. And so they slowly reached that point of, I can teach this. And that's the highest point that you can get in any learning process, and that was part of it.
I remember at one February conference, Monta and her staff had developed the Leander Way game. And basically it's a board game that had philosophical questions and the answers that you had to ask and answer in order to advance on the board. And people sat down at the conference and enjoyed playing the game and didn't question really anything about the fact that was who we are and how we go about educating students. So I think that came probably over a period of a couple of years after we were much more informal about how we went about educating people and continuing to help them understand how to get better in terms of the continuous improvement philosophy. We quit calling it anything. We kept pressing. We kept highlighting those people who we thought were exemplifying what we wanted. And over a period of a couple of years, it I guess just kind of clicked, and people actually didn't question it anymore. And this came with a lot of work in terms of continuing to educate people over and over and over and over again. And we continued to learn new things by bringing people like Myron Tribus and Brian Cole and lots of other people. I mean, Monta and I and several others actually got the opportunity early on to go to a Deming conference and listen to Dr. Deming. So it really was persistence and in continuing to push it and not wavering on the fact that this is the direction that we want to go.
But how do we continue the learning in a deeper way was another question we had. What are other opportunities for people to hear the words, to get the modeling, to take it back, to practice it? And we came up with a Continuous Improvement Institute. And this institute is 6 meetings throughout the year, 3 hours at a time. We bring people in, they sign up for the whole year, serve them a light dinner, and we take little chunks of the philosophy and the practicality of what continuous improvement means in Leander ISD, following the Leander Way, and looking at our other guiding documents and applying it in a way that they can get the depth to take back to their classrooms, work with students, because our ultimate goal is that the students also begin to assimilate all of this as just part of how you learn. They don't need to be taught the theory as much as they need to think this is just the way it is.
We developed people with additional expertise that we call process improvement facilitators, and they don't receive additional money or any kind of stipend for this, but they do. They have the privilege of going to even more training and becoming more knowledgeable in order to help groups. So we have process improvement facilitators that help people as they go through go through an improvement team, that those people have more knowledge, and it makes it to hold people's hand a little bit if they're a little uncomfortable about the process or what they need to do. So I think that's an example also of how we started with a core group and then said, as we grow larger, how are we going to be able to support that? And I think, and right now we're at a point we realize that we probably don't have enough process improvement facilitators to meet the demand that we have of growing districts. And that's a new problem that we're, in fact, doing a PDSA on. How do we have effective process improvement facilitators to fill the need, as well as having all of those improvement efforts aligned and not pulling against each other.
But the Continuous Improvement Institute was really able to take small groups of people, have them work together, have them go into their classrooms and apply the learning, come back and talk about what they did, how they did, what worked, what didn't work, another way of bringing down the fear and learning from each other, because that's the way it happens. The first one we did at the end of that year, the people who were graduating from our Continuous Improvement Institute said, okay, what's next? We want a level 2 Continuous Improvement Institute. So we had a level 2 and a level 1, and eventually we had a level 3. And it began to be more than that. We couldn't keep going. So I think right now we're pretty much at the level 1, and then other ways to work with people to continue their learning, and the fact that they become the leaders on their campuses in teaching others what they're doing. When the person next door says, how do your students do that? How do you get them to do that? It's a perfect time for those just-in-time learnings.